The night settled over the plains in a stillness so gentle it felt like the world was pausing. Caleb had been mending the boundary fence, listening to the soft pulse of distant grass, when a faint beat of footsteps emerged from the east. Slow, unsteady, the kind a person hears only when they have passed long years mastering the language of solitude. He straightened up, letting the hammer slip from his grasp, and watched two shapes draw closer across the fading light. One leaned heavily into the other. Her body was bent as if the day had claimed more from her than she could yield. Sarah supported her with a power touched by desperation. Their shadows stretched long behind them, shivering at the edges. When they reached him, the older woman tried to stand tall, though her knees trembled. "Welcome my daughter inside. I'll rest outside," she whispered, her voice worn by tiredness. The daughter tightened her hold, eyes fierce yet diminished by anxiety. Caleb approached them with slow, measured calm, declining her request with a gentle shake of his head. No one slept outside his cabin unless they chose to, and these women clearly had no options left. He guided them inside, leading the mother to his bed and offering the daughter the small bench near the fire. The heat flickered across their faces, revealing the depth of their fatigue. He set a pot of stew before them, keeping his voice low, cautious. The mother ate only a few sips before her vigor failed. The daughter took her portion silently, her hands shaking, though she tried to conceal it. That first night passed in a tender kind of silence. He placed his bed near the door, leaving them the comfort of the fire's light. The daughter observed him as he settled, confusion softening her reserved expression. He offered no explanation beyond a nod, and she finally leaned her head against the wall, eyelids heavy. Outside, the wind outlined the shape of the cabin like an old friend visiting. Morning brought little relief. The mother's breathing was faint, her eyes wandering. Still, she insisted she could walk, and with her daughter's aid she stepped outside to feel the early sun. Caleb fetched water, herbs, anything that might lessen her distress. The daughter watched him with a mix of doubt and gratitude, unsure which emotion deserved more space. Over the next days, he discovered their story in parts, spoken only when the daughter seemed too tired to protect the truth. Hunger had troubled their people, illness had dispersed them, the world had grown severe, and the routes they walked carried more sorrow than hope. The mother listened with closed eyes, letting her daughter's voice unravel the pain they had carried alone. Caleb listened without insisting, answering only with kindness. He prepared meals, repaired the torn edges of their blankets, and offered what little steadiness his quiet life permitted. Slowly, the daughter began to rely on the silence between them, knowing that not all quiet was dangerous. But the mother declined quickly. By the third night, she could barely lift her head. The daughter sat beside her, humming low tunes in the firelight. Caleb kept watch from the far corner, the glow catching the sorrow beginning to gather in her eyes. At dawn, the mother's breathing ceased. No cry broke the air. The daughter simply bent over her, shoulders quivering in a grief too deep for speech. Caleb stepped outside, giving her the room to say goodbye. The sky was pale, the wind calm, as if the land itself paused to listen to the daughter's shattered heart. They buried the mother beneath a cottonwood not far from the cabin. The earth was soft from recent rain, and the daughter pressed her palm to it, whispering something Caleb did not try to hear. Some words belonged only to the living and the dead. As they walked back toward the cabin, her steps slowed. She looked toward the horizon, the weight of uncertainty pulling at her. Caleb saw the query forming in her silence, a question about safety, about tomorrow, about whether the road ahead held space for a girl with nowhere left to go. And in that delicate moment, he felt the world change, as if her unspoken fear had already begun to cut a path straight into his life. The days that followed moved with a strange, measured rhythm, as if the cabin itself knew it needed to hold its breath. The daughter tried to assist with chores, though her hands often shook from exhaustion and sorrow. Caleb guided her gently, demonstrating how to grind herbs, how to split wood without straining her wrists, how to tell when the kettle sounded instead of boiled. She listened with quiet resolve, every small skill giving her a piece of steadiness. Sometimes she would pause at the doorway, staring out at the plains where the wind moved free. He wondered if she searched for the past or dreaded the future. At night, he heard her move in her sleep, murmuring her mother's name like a fragile link to the world she had lost. He wished he could lighten the heaviness she carried. But grief was not something a man could remove from another's shoulders. It had to be traversed step by step. One evening, as the sunset stained gold across the sky, she finally uttered more than a few words. She said her mother had seen goodness in him to entrust him with her last breath. Caleb felt that truth settle inside him, forming a resolve he could not ignore. Days merged into one another with a quiet assurance of river stones settling deeper beneath the flow, and the daughter moved through the cabin as if reacquainting how to occupy her own body. Grief eased her steps but did not shatter them, and Caleb watched with a patience shaped by years of aloneness. Each morning he rose early to tend the fire, leaving its warmth awaiting her when she emerged from sleep's fragile sanctuary. She tried to hide how much this small mercy stabilized her, yet he could see it in the way her shoulders relaxed when she stepped into the golden glow. He taught her the rhythm of his land with the gentlest teaching, steady hands directing hers as she learned to grind herbs without losing their scent and to mend torn cloth so the stitches held even through wind-bitten nights. In those quiet lessons, something unspoken began to live between them. By late afternoon, the sun stretched long shadows across the grasslands, and the daughter often paused beside the doorway as if listening for a voice carried on the wind. Caleb pretended not to notice, giving her the respect of private sorrow, yet he felt the pain of her longing as keenly as the land felt drought. She had lost not only her mother, but the whole plan of her life, and every uncertain breath showed how she feared becoming exposed. When townfolk wandered near the cabin for supplies or gossip, he stepped forward with quiet authority, redirecting conversations away from her, making sure no sharp word reached her ears. She saw it in glimpses, the way he protected her without claiming ownership, the way he offered safety rather than dominance, and these small mercies wove themselves into her heart. Soon she found herself seeking his presence, not out of necessity, but out of the strange comfort his proximity offered. One evening, the sky blazed with crimson light as if the sun were trying to inscribe a warning across the horizon. The daughter carried water from the creek while Caleb fixed a broken hinge. She worked carefully, though her hands still lacked the confidence of someone raised to believe things would not fall apart. As she returned to the cabin, a ranch hand from the nearby settlement rode past, his stare lingering too long, sharp with disapproval. Caleb stepped forward, placing himself between the stranger's gaze and the young woman's shivering breath. Nothing was said, but the message twisted in the air like smoke from a gun not yet fired. When the rider finally moved on, she stood motionless, unsure whether to thank him or apologize for the trouble her presence caused. He told her softly that she owed no one an apology for surviving. The words sank deep within her, revising a truth she had forgotten she deserved. Night came with a gentleness that disguised the tension stirring beneath the surface of their lives. The daughter sat beside the fire, turning a small wooden carving her mother had carried for years, its edges worn smooth by countless prayers. Caleb watched her from the far side of the room, seeing how grief had not lessened her strength, but sharpened it into something quieter and more firm. She spoke softly of the man who had once sought her, a rancher's son who admired her beauty, yet disappeared when hardship pressed against her family's door. She did not speak his name, only the memory of disappointment that lingered like a bruise. Caleb felt a quiet anger rise within him, not at her past, but at the way she felt it was her burden to bear alone. He wished for a moment that words could repair the places where life had hurt her, yet he kept silent, knowing healing needed time more than statements. The next days moved with a softer tune, as if the land itself felt the fragile hope forming between them. They shared meals, seasoned more by fellowship than spice. Working side by side in a rhythm that slowly released the tightness in her chest, she began to smile again, small and hesitant at first, like a bird testing the air before flight. Caleb noticed each shift, holding them like treasures he dared not claim. Yet beneath the tenderness, a storm gathered in her heart. One evening, as thunder rumbled through the distant hills, she admitted in a trembling whisper that she dreaded staying, feared needing him, feared the pain of losing yet another piece of herself if she clung to comfort she had no right to claim. Her voice cracked as she said she should depart before the cabin became a reminder of all she could never truly belong to. Caleb felt the world tilt then, as if the storm outside had found its reflection in his chest. He stepped closer, not with speed, but with a steady seriousness that had defined his life long before she arrived. He told her that she was not a trouble, that the land had room for her, that he feared her leaving more than he dreaded the loneliness he had once worn like a second skin. His words shook, though he tried to hide it, and for the first time she saw weakness beneath his quiet strength. The fire cast moving light across his face, showing the raw truth he had tried to keep. She stared at him, split between the instinct to flee and the longing to stay. Her breath caught between hope and doubt. Rain began to beat against the roof, each drop like a heartbeat, urging her to choose the life before her. She stepped closer, until only a breath separated them, her eyes searching his as if trying to read a pledge in their steady warmth. She whispered that she did not know how to stay without losing herself, and he replied that staying was not giving up, but the start of something neither had expected. Her hand lifted slowly, trembling as it brushed his, and in that touch a fragile hope arose. Lightning flashed, filling the cabin with pale light, and she felt her fear break just enough for bravery to enter. The moment hung between them, trembling with the chance of everything waiting just beyond the storm ahead.